everybody. Today we are joined with AC Lang, a founder of womensoccer.ca, a media platform that covers everything around Canadian women's soccer. Today we're going to be discussing the unpleasant ongoings with the women's national team and Canada Soccer. On Friday, the Canadians women's national team announced that they were going on strike over pay and equity concerns after Canada Soccer reported funding cuts. The players and the Players Association said they were feeling outraged and deeply concerned with this news. After hours of negotiating, the board threatened to sue the players if they went on strike, jeopardizing the She Believes Cup. The current situation stands that the players will participate in the Friendly Cup to avoid any sanctions. AC, when you saw this start going on Friday, what even went through your head?
Felt shocked, but not shocked also. I don't know, just super disappointed, heavy, like once again. I feel like there's been a few of those moments over the last 2-3 years.
Mm.
And overwhelmingly surprised. I mean, they dropped it on my drive home, so I had to as soon as I got home, I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What's going on? But yeah, disappointed mostly. How about you?
Yeah, probably the same. Definitely not how I envisioned my Friday to go. I don't know if anybody's aware, but if you check Twitter, a lot of the players were putting emojis. It looked like an announcement was coming, but I don't think this kind of announcement was on anybody's head, considering the She Believes Cup is kicking off soon and it's a World Cup year. So cutting funds and programs is like that wouldn't even be a thought. In a way, I was kind of surprised to see that the board was willing to have a meeting right away. I thought that was a great step and almost a shocking good step that they saw how the players reacted and they were like, you know what, let's go on a board meeting tomorrow. The board meeting happens. They're negotiating for 6 hours. We're getting all this information that we're not getting a deal. There's no bargaining taking place, and you start to hear that the board wants to threaten and they want to sue. I mean, how did you even react seeing that at one point they were talking about they don't have the money to pay the players. Next thing you're hearing is that they've actually got the money to sue the players.
Yeah. But even when you just repeat all of it, it just makes you think what does CSA think the possible good outcome
Yeah.
would be from this? And it's hard to think of one because they've now antagonized everyone in the women's soccer world. And
Mm.
everyone's like, things are different. Things have changed in the last few years. People are a lot more vocal. And so we're seeing this power back moment, but the CSA just intends to say one thing publicly, which is, gender equity, and we're working towards this, and we're working towards this. And it's been a year already,
Mm.
over probably with the whole process of bargaining. So yeah, it's a shocker, and I fail to see what the possible good outcome could have been from threatening a lawsuit to players who are already so pissed off. Have you seen them this pissed off? I haven't in a while, and it takes them a lot to say stuff because they're
Mm.
not as vocal as some of the other teams have been.
Yep.
But now that they're having to be, it's getting really ugly. We're hearing about lawsuits. Would they be able to countersue? Sounds like they can't afford anything because they
Mm.
haven't been paid.
Yeah, that we did find that out after the latest statement of the Players Association that they have not been paid for the 2022 period. So that includes the CONCACAF Championship, which is also the World Cup qualifiers and the Olympics qualifiers. To find out that the players haven't even been paid, it's understandable that this has been bottled up for a minute. And you can even start to wonder of why did they put a statement this late on. I would assume that they thought this is not going to take the lengths of suing and taking it to court and threatening players and putting them in a situation where they genuinely have limited action in terms of if they wanted to strike, they can strike. So this is another thing that got brought up in the terms of the players brought this up in a friendly cup. It's a World Cup year. There's no reason to bring this up unless they thought it was necessary. But also it happened so late purely because I don't think they thought the board was this stubborn and this.
Yeah, you don't want to insult people too aggressively, but it's hard to understand some of the moves, as you're saying. And it just speaks to kind of the level of disrespect in my mind. Mainly because, okay, you're asking about the timelines. The timelines are tight because Bev found out in January that to Canada Soccer, pay equity means just cutting the same amount from each program. That's gender equity, right?
Apparently.
And so the men, they've gone on this amazing run, and we've we funded it and we've had to, and like we've come up with ways to meet the high demands that these players are under. Like these players were flying first class or like chartering airplanes for
Mm.
these trips within CONCACAF. And I would argue that they should, because those are the standards and they need to perform. And then you're hearing about business class for the players traveling within the States for this trip. And you just hear about the reality of some of these budget cuts already. And so that just speaks to the players are now feeling that acutely because they've arrived in camp and they see they have, 60% less medical staff than the United States, for example. And they see that, and I think they're just at a point of, no more. And that's kind of what the language was. It's like, enough is enough.
Yeah, I think the trigger point may have been the World Cup in terms of it's not a discussion of comparing how much Canada Soccer is funding the men's and how much Canada Soccer is funding the women's. It's more so of clearly one is appreciated more than the other. Like you mentioned, everybody celebrated the great run the men's went on. And it's a great celebration. They haven't been to a World Cup in 36 years. Everybody had the right to make sure they enjoyed it. They gave the players what they were asking. They made sure the players were in the best situation and environment to thrive. And unfortunately, this has not been reflected for the women's team. It's not looking at the amount of numbers or millions of dollars that were spent on the men's team and saying, well, we want the exact same. We're not asking for the exact same. I mean, they're asking for basic funding. You look, I mean, like you mentioned, comparing it to the U.S. women's national team, they've got medical staff, 2-3 times the amount of medical staff that we've got. They're not charting the regular seats. They're not having to return camp gear. I think that's another thing that we found out last year is that a lot of these players leaving camp are returning camp gear so they can reuse it again for the upcoming camp. This is not the way, this is not the level we should be treating our high level athletes that we want to send to the World Cup and give them the best opportunity and thriving in a World Cup. I don't think the Federation is setting up the team to success. It's even hard to argue and say, well, you know what, the Federation has backed us up the entire time. This is why we're the reigning Olympic champions. This is why we've podiumed twice at the Olympics. In the nicest way possible and very harshly, that talent and that success is purely because of the grassroots funding. It's because of the grassroots efforts. The players that are making it to the senior team, it's not because they're being backed up by the Federation or, that amount of spending is being put into the senior team. It's purely because we've somehow gone lucky with the grassroots talent that has made it into the senior team. So imagine a world where we've got this much talent and we're actually giving it the funding, we're giving it the backing up. We're not cutting funds in a World Cup here. I mean, can you just imagine the potential that we could have?
Yeah, it just speaks to the lack of vision, once again, around women's soccer. And so the wave that we're seeing now of growth, of, significant growth in the last few years, started 5-10 years ago. And it was not impossible to spot the trend, like you started to see it. And you knew that once there was investment in Europe and in the US, and it's not like it happened yesterday. There's just been never any kind of ambitious vision around the women's professional soccer, the women's national team. A lot of the success has been by chance and by like just amazing individual efforts and people that really champion the program. Being that, John Herdman, Christine Sinclair, there's numbers, Bev even, she's been there for so long with the youth teams even, and there's a number of people really propping it up.
Yeah.
But I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we thought that the CSA had put any kind of just future seeking investment into this. And so they're actually now just cutting it. And speaking of the future, a big part of it is the youth team. And the senior players actually feel like they're doing the youth teams a disservice if they don't speak up now, because they recognize the importance of the youth team in their own track record. Most of them have played in the youth national team at some point. And so they're also really standing up for the youth programs, which are seeing cuts at all levels, for the national team program and for the national development programs, actually. They've also had cuts at the NDCs. And so that's not a good thing. And it's just lack of vision is my word for it.
Lack of vision. It's been a lack of vision for a minute. You spoke about trends. They haven't been able to pinpoint the trends that they can jump on and start to actually invest, start to actually want to grow, start to give the appropriate funding for the players that they have. Look at the 2015 World Cup. I mean, it broke so many records. It hit so many top level audience viewership That was the time to jump on it. They missed it. Come the 2019 World Cup, you look at the numbers, they massively underfunded the women's national team in terms if you compare it to other federations, but also if you look at that where the other expenses went. The men got a fair bit more funding in a CONCACAF year and a CONCACAF Gold Cup year where they were knocked out by Hayati in the quarterfinals compared to the women's, sorry, that got a lot less money in a World Cup year when they were ranked 5th in the world. So this is a trend that we see every single year. Fundings get cut in a World Cup year. And in a way, we can't say, oh, well, the women's team crashed early. Talking about the U19s and U17s in their World Cup, they both crashed out early in the group stages. But in a way, did they really crash out early?
The funding cuts every time to the World Cup teams. Like, I feel like overall the women's national team has overachieved expectations, like given their resources or their lack of resources at times. And I don't want to be that person that doesn't acknowledge that Canada Soccer is not a rich federation, especially in context of other like powerhouses at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But I still just the intentions and the messages that we're setting with our lack of funding and lack of investment is getting really tiresome. And I think that's what we're seeing now from the players. They're just reacting to that because it's not like they're not used to being disrespected. You know, they've had that early on in their club careers and now it's kind of getting a more livable wages and leagues and stuff, but they're tired of this. It's been their whole career fighting.
It's been their whole career, and a lot of the players that are kind of more towards the end of their career have compared and said, this has been happening for 20 years. Like you mentioned, Christine Sinclair is now fighting for that youth system. She doesn't want to see the system continue on and on and on for that future generation. Amy Walsh even spoke about this. She said this was going on 20 years ago. This shouldn't be happening. You look at the federations, the other federations, and like you mentioned, it's understandable that Canada Soccer is not the most rich and it's not got resources flooding in, but it's definitely got enough resources and commitments to be able to fund a good program. It's able to fund the potential that we have. It's able to fund the characters that we have. You look at the women's national team. I mean, how marketable is that team, honestly, compared to the other national teams?
I think, we haven't gotten nearly to our potential in terms of marketing the women's team, but given that lack of funding, those players are highly visible. The team is highly visible. Anytime they play in an important game like Canada will tune in. And they have the most visible women's soccer player in our entire country's history that almost every Canadian knows. I don't think there's a lot of Canadians that don't know Christine Sinclair, who is now saying, I don't want to put on this badge. And so it'll be interesting. They'll probably turn their tops inside out for the warm-up at least. So we'll see, because it hasn't been resolved. She said this is not over.
Yeah.
And so we'll see where we go from here.
To them, they cannot jeopardize the She Believes Cup. Obviously, a lot of fans are going over to the US. The games are highly anticipated, and this is how it should be. A year of World Cup needs to have highly anticipated games. Bev and her staff have been able to go out and book these very, very important games. They've been able to go out and put goals for the rest of the year. They've been able to go out and put ambitions for the rest of the year, put some really important messages to what they want to do in the World Cup. But when you don't have that backing behind you, when you don't have a federation that wants to support the staff, the manager, the coaching round, and the players, it's hard to do what you want to do, and it's hard to not feel frustrated with the job. I don't think the players right now at the pre-camp or the camp even for the She Believes Cup are happy doing what they're doing. I highly doubt it.
No, they're all competitors. They wanted to play in the tournament just like everyone else. This is going to be actually the closest they play to home for a while, apparently. So, there's not going to be a send-off match, sounds like, or at least there won't be an April window home match. Sounds like they're going to France, but it's an important window. It's the first window in the World Cup year, and I'm sure the players want to play, but this is such an awkward way for it to happen. Like, they're on strike. Oh, wait, Ontario law makes it illegal. Oh, wait, no one cares. Like, it's just these statements that have been coming out are just shocking every time. And so we'll all be following. A lot of people have been wondering also whether they should watch or not. I feel like the eyes need to be on the team. So I think people should be watching. So that means getting the One Soccer subscription, because that's where the games will be. But especially for that first game, just to see what happens, because I have a feeling it could be actually quite historic. I think you're going to see something in collaboration with the US players as well. Maybe they'll huddle up, we'll see. But I think we all need to have eyes on that moment because I think it's symbolic and hopefully it means forward moving change and everyone huddling up and figuring this stuff out, because whether it's new leadership or not, it's the whole system that needs to change in a way. In Canada, the system of belief or lack of belief that we have in women's soccer and women's sport generally, Canada does well at the Olympic level, but rarely at the professional or semi-professional level in terms of women's sports. So yeah, we all need to see what is happening. And then in terms of people going to the stadium, like I would turn those Canada soccer jerseys inside out for sure, or wear like a club top or just red. But I would not have a Canada soccer logo in sight. That's just me personally. And let's hope One Soccer is actually brave about it and, you know, maybe points at some of the signs that people have brought in. And whatever that message is, just one of support, obviously, behind the team. And we'll see how it goes.
We need to hold these people accountable. They are at the board, the president especially does not have a great track record. Canada Soccer does not have a great track record, despite the statements that they came out with saying that they are backing up the women's team. They have been continuously backing up the women's team. Their track record has not been very transparent. Canada Soccer does lack transparency. They were only able to showcase the separate spendings between the women's national team and the men's national team a few years back. And it's hard to make a conclusion when those numbers are not out. So how do you see this going? How do you see this wrapping up, ending? What is the ideal solution? And what do you think the actual solution that we will see?
Yeah, you're right. Like Canada Soccer has a real transparency issue. I think that's kind of always been the case. We've seen it with the 2008 situation. We've seen it so many times, and so that is intimately linked, I think, with their poor governance. I think if anyone read those reports that kind of recently were forced to come out, finally these public reports that still are kind of lacking transparency, ironically, they show the same thing, that Canada Soccer hasn't been following its own safety and safe sport policies. It's shown a lack of transparency, a poor level of governance and attention to detail. Like, why have they been communicating so poorly for so long? And I think it just, for me, comes back to the symptoms that haunt the sport in Canada, which is lack of transparency, kind of these bad actors that are incapable of really truly pulling in the same direction, and this pervasive misogyny that we're still fighting against, to be honest. That's what it always comes back to.
Yeah, it's hard not to point the finger at the bit of misogyny. The trend is, again, embarrassing within itself. It's hard to see that every time the men's team doesn't necessarily fit the narrative they're trying to achieve, the women's get the hit of it. They don't want to see the women succeed over the men's in a way. It is a big stretch, but it's hard to not say that the numbers go after that.
Yeah, it's hard to make any kind of conclusions about intention, I think, at this point, based on the amount of money that has been given to the men's national team over the past few years. And, you know, anyone who knows me knows that I'm like intimately tied to that men's team through even my own family and just a staff member. But they receive a lot of money over the last 2 years, be it, 20 million. You've got to imagine at least near 15 to 20 million. And so now to say that the women have survived on like 5 million, less than 5 million a year for a decade, just speaks to the fact that Nick Bontis and Earl Cochran and just a bunch of those people who are truly making the decisions at Canada Soccer are showing the women exactly how much they value them.
Yeah, no, you're certainly very accurate there. It's hard not to agree with it. Again, the evidence is there, the numbers are there, and it's for as much as there's lack of transparency, whatever transparency there is there, it does show a certain narrative. Yeah, it's going to be, this is only the start. Like a lot of them saying, it's not over. Fight's just begun. Myself and AC are active on Twitter to keep updating you on this with the latest news from the players, the captain, the She Believes Cup. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So I'll leave our links down in the description. We just don't, it's not just Canadian supporters that need to jump on this, but it's women's soccer supporters in general that need to jump on this. It's very similar to how everybody is supporting the 15 players that have stepped away from the Spanish Federation. everybody should also be coming together for this. And it's important to show our support. So definitely we are going to be keeping you updated on this. Hopefully the situation comes to a resolution that suits the players, meets the players' demands and above and beyond, because this is what they deserve.
Better to end on an optimistic note.
I mean, you had to. There's not much optimism going around other than what the players are fighting, and I think that's the best way to do it. So definitely make sure to check out AC's Twitter, mine as well. We're keeping you posted, and we will also keep you posted with the latest news on this.